Warm welcome to you all. This panel discussion will focus solely on logistics, in particular how to connect and successfully connect a continent. We'll be honing in on the best solutions for landlocked countries. We'll be looking at what lessons can be learned from Dubai, in particular looking at its ports and infrastructure in that regard, and also the merits of road and rail transport. So without further ado, let me introduce you to my esteemed panel of guests. Next to me, I'm delighted to say I'm joined by the Honourable Dr. Gabriel Ajedra. He is Minister of State for Finance and Investment in Uganda. Please welcome him. Next up is Anders Spore. He is the Chief Executive Officer of Hinduja Automotives from India. Please welcome him also. John Ngumi is next. He is Senior Director for Standard Bank in Kenya. Suresh Chaturvedi is the Group Chairman of OIA, which stands for Overseas Infrastructure Alliance. Please welcome him. And Rigobert Deka is the Director General of Gabon's Port Authorities. A very warm welcome to you, sir. So let's get straight to it. The format will be as follows. I will ask my panelists to introduce themselves and briefly explain why they're here on the panel, what they hope to bring to the table in our discussion about logistics. We'll then do a brief Q&A, and we'd like to have this as interactive a session as possible. So if you have a question, simply raise your hand and we'll bring a microphone straight to you. So in that regard, Minister, over to you.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. As has been said, I'm the Minister of State for Investment, Republic of Uganda. My role is really to promote investment in Uganda. And my coming here serves three purposes. One of which is I wanted to come and listen to what the concerns are from potential investors or those who are doing business in Uganda and East Africa in general. And two, I wanted to know, with the success story that we've been talking about in Dubai, how can we learn? What can we learn from their success? Three, to acknowledge the fact that yes, we have bottlenecks in terms of promoting trade, not only between the states in East Africa and Africa, but also between Africa and the rest of the world. And logistics is certainly part of that problem. I think from the previous session, you could hear the concerns and some of the issues that came out. Logistics certainly is very, very crucial. I think in the morning, the figures were that if you had to move a container from Dubai to Mombasa Port, which is the closest to us in Uganda, it costs about 4,000. I think it was 1,500. Now, to move it from Mombasa inland, where Uganda is, which is a landlocked country, it will cost you about 3,500, 3,400. So you can see that those countries that are landlocked inside, they have issues of logistics. And that can be best addressed if you look at our infrastructure. We all know that water transport is the cheapest form of transport, and followed by railway. And then you go to road, and then you go to the air transport. Now, for landlocked countries like Uganda, it therefore means that if you have to bring down the cost of doing business, if you have to bring down the cost of logistics, you need to improve on the rail network. Now, as we speak right now, the rail network that links Uganda is not really fully functional. And so you find most of our cargo has been placed on the road. And that increases the cost of doing business. So my purpose here was basically to come and discuss with yourselves what are the ways, what are the solutions. And you know that infrastructure costs, such as railway, are very, very expensive. They can only be done by government. That is government responsibility. And therefore, money is not in short supply. But then the question is, how do you best address this infrastructure bottlenecks to be able to improve the cost of doing business, reducing the cost of doing business, and so on. So that's really what my purpose for attending this conference is. In addition, of course, to networking and also promoting investment to the region.
Thank you very much, Minister. Anders, over to you. A bit about you and why you're here, your standpoint when it comes to logistics.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I happen to be a Swede from Sweden, sitting here, having spent 18 years of my business career in Latin America, living in the UK the last 15 years, and I'm representing a company which is owned by a family, the Hinduja family, that has its origin from Pakistan, had to go to India, set up a business in Iran, and had to move out of Iran and continue their business in the rest of the world. I think this is my perspective, which means that I have a multifaceted perspective, which I think all of us need when looking also at the bilateral relation between Dubai and Africa. And I look forward to discussing logistics issues in which business I've been the last 30 years with the various participants here.
Thank you. We look forward to hearing your thoughts. John, over to you.
Thank you and good afternoon. I shall start with a correction. I'm not a senior director. My bosses would fire me if they hear that. I've called myself that. I'm what is loosely called a senior banker with a mandate to roam the continent on behalf of the bank. Standard Bank is the largest bank on the continent by assets. It is a bank that lives and dies by Africa. So we don't have a choice but to be focused on this continent. So my purpose in coming here today is quite obvious. I need to be here. In terms of logistics, we as a bank have created 3 hubs on the continent, in Nairobi, in Lagos, and in Johannesburg. And it is very clear that we need to get those hubs working into the various regions, into the hinterland that the minister has mentioned, and to us, getting connectivity, whether it's rail, road, port, airport, pipeline, call it what you may, is very important. There isn't a lack of money. I think we are capable of generating money to fund projects. But there is a dire lack of bankable transactions. And one of the themes I've come in here to try and appreciate is how to make transactions viable. For example, you've developed in Dubai the Dubai port, and Dubai World Ports is working very hard on Djibouti. If you look at the east coast of Africa, you've got Mombasa, Mozambique, and so on. There is a dire need for ports to be put together, which will serve the broader hinterland of Africa. And airports are the other. Nairobi prides itself as being a hub for travel into East, Central, and Southern Africa, but it is no comparison at all with Dubai. How does Dubai help us to make a Nairobi airport a proper hub airport? So I'm here not so much to say that we can look for money, we have the money, we can access the resources, even from Dubai, but more here to understand how to make these logistics projects in Africa viable.
Thank you very much, John. Suresh, over to you.
Good evening. Thank you. Tough time because end of all the sessions. And I've been working in India for infrastructure project for long, almost 35 years. 2003, I landed in Africa with 7 bags with water, food, everything that what I'll get and what I will not get. And from that time, I'm stuck up in Africa and Focus Africa. Basically, 3 sector, agro-based, logistics, and power. I look after that. I have done almost 10,000 kilometers of electrification. I have done 2 largest sugar plants. And I have done in one country 5,000 kilometers of railway. I have been given subject here, railway, so I'll be coming on that only and speaking to you. A continent which is more than 1 billion and 60% land has not been yet cultivated, imports 70% of the food. Why? A continent needs industrialization, and I have to put up a plant, and instead of 18 months, it takes me 36 months because of the port and the logistic problem. And the cost goes 30% high. Why? A continent exports $508 billion of material and imports $470 billion of material, and the cost is almost 30% of the import and export. This all shows the infrastructure is required, and the cheap infrastructure. What could be that thing? Air transport, yes, needed very much, because if you want to inter-country transport, you cannot do it. Either you have to go to Ethiopia, Kenya, South Africa. You can't do interconnect. Road transport, you need it because it's a big continent. But the transport cost is almost 30% against the standard of 7% internationally. So you pay 22% more. Now, if you pay 22% more, how can you be economical? Because Africa is not making high-tech item. They are in agriculture, and they import also food. Why they are importing 70% food? Because they cannot bring the food from outside. And all the food which is made inside, which is called landlocked countries, the food is wasted. So being water, manpower, land, Africa imports food worth $50 billion. So why it cannot do? Because it does not have a cheap infrastructure or less costly infrastructure. And that can only be done by railway, because it saves 67% of the cost. A 1 gallon of diesel can take 1 ton of material to 497 miles. So it has an integrated approach which has to be done, and it is not the option, it is must. The time has come. And for international business also, it is a business which is available there. So it is the responsibility of international community to be there. Now, Gulf and particular to UAE, they are consumer of all the consumer good. Africa produces it. You have the trading hub, you have industrial environment, you can use the natural resources of Africa, only the factor of cost is there. As Minister has told, that money is not the problem. I was working in a country, 2006, I was fighting that railway should be done. It was a landlocked country. I planned for 5,000 kilometers. People said, from where $20 billion is going to come? And now, they have already finalized 1,500 kilometers of that railway. So money has come, money is there, only intention at political level, everything should be there, and I think that has to be done. Thank you.
Thank you very much. How to cut those costs, so important when it comes to the sustainability and profitability of the logistics sector. And last but by no means least, Rigobert, please.
Hi, I'm Rigobert. I would like to apologize for my English, because my English is not very good. Why I am here? I am here because I think that the infrastructure is very important to bring a relationship between Africa and the world. In Africa, more than 18% of foreign exchange are used the ports infrastructures. It's why I think that it's important for us here to exchange and find the best way to improve our port capacity.
Merci énormément, monsieur. So let's start with the Q&A. Minister, I will come to you first. In terms of Uganda, it needs around $5 billion, is that right, to upgrade and maintain its current rail network. Number one, where is the money coming from? Is it already earmarked? Number two, what can you do to bring those costs down? Rail is always very capital intensive, so what can we do to reduce those costs?
Yeah, the projections for infrastructure development, particularly the rail network in Uganda, is about $5 billion. Mm-hmm. That includes the new line that we're looking at connecting Uganda to South Sudan. Now, the current railway network was built by the Indians, I think in 1950s, 60s, before independence, long time ago, and is the narrow gauge that is currently existing. Now, the East African community has agreed that we should all move to the standard gauge. That means from Mombasa all the way to Kampala, to western Uganda, north up to southern Sudan, it has to be standard gauge. And as you know, as I said before, rail infrastructure is very expensive. It doesn't come very cheap. Now, it needs a little bit of coordination. I know our friends from Kenya, I think, are slightly ahead of us. They have started upgrading their railway network to the standard gauge. But in Uganda, we have not. Now, what happens when you move a wagon from Mombasa to the border with Uganda? So there's going to be a constraint. So there's need to do coordination. And secondly also, my colleague here talked about the port. As we speak right now, Mombasa port is congested. And there's need to expand that port. The time that is lost by ships just being in the queue to be offloaded before the turnaround is quite tremendous. I think that's why the Kenyans are also in the process of putting up a new port, Lamu, which is slightly further in the north. So these are some of the logistical constraints that need to be removed. Uganda, as I said, we need about $5 billion just for the railway network.
Okay.
The road is the same. We are an agricultural country. There is need for us to export some of our perishable items, such as flowers, for example. We do export a lot of flowers. Now, the current airport, has reached this capacity because it was designed some years ago. So there's need also now to upgrade the airport to be able to accommodate more flights, more passengers, more cargo. The cargo terminal has reached its limit. We cannot take an additional cargo because of that constraints. So in terms of the physical infrastructure, in terms of doing those infrastructure projects that will help to bring down the cost of business, it is enormous. And how do you raise the money? There are several options. One of them is what we're looking at is issuing infrastructure bond. I know our colleagues in Zambia have done that, very successful at 5.5%. Tanzania, I think, did a flexible bond also at around 5-6%. So in Uganda, we're looking at issuing maybe a 10-year bond. That should be able to raise the required capital to fund the infrastructure. The other option, of course, is going to partnership. Triple P is another way to do it. Yes, they are a little bit complex and expensive, but in the absence of you not having your own money, that may be the other option that you have to go through. You may borrow, the traditional borrowing from World Bank, African Development Bank, and so on. But those are all processes that take a lot of time. So we believe that I think working with the private sector, we're going to be able to look at all these financial models that can help to deliver some of these projects. Failing which is what we talked about here, that it makes cost of doing business very prohibitive. You cannot attract investors. So these are things that we need to do as government, and we're certainly determined to do that. And lastly also, there is the other option of having what we call a bilateral arrangement with the partners who are willing to fund such projects. That's the other way to do it. The good thing is that I think in the next 4 or 5 years, we shall be getting to the production stage of commercial production of oil and gas. So we're hoping that that money then can be used to be able to fund some of these infrastructure projects. And as a matter of fact, His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Uganda, has said the money which is going to come from the oil is going to be diverted towards funding infrastructure. So we believe that I think that will be able to give us some kind of breathing space when we begin to get revenues from oil.
Thank you very much. So much I want to come back to regarding the financing, lessons that could be learned, not least from the Dubai models when it comes to the airports and the ports. I will revisit this topic, I promise. Anders, let me come to you. In terms of your presence actually here in the Middle East, tell us a bit more about that, your strategy going forward, and how that plays into the Africa picture. How can both benefit?
Well, the vehicle company that we're running, Ashok Leyland, we have set up a factory here in Ras Al Khaimah, close to Sharjah and Dubai, and we actually have our support center for the African continent here in the area. And we're very happy about that. We have recently reached the capacity ceiling, and we are seriously considering doubling the capacity for the future, which has improved the business conditions for our African partners. We are operating in 27 markets on a permanent basis in Africa, and I can say that only 4 years ago we were only operating in 4 markets. So you can imagine the kind of expansion we've had and will continue to have in Africa. We're also looking forward to moving ahead in the value addition that lots of people have talked about, because if you look at the bus making, it's not really suitable to make a big bus here in Ras Al Khaimah and transport it to Western Africa. And there's a lot of air that will be transported, not so much bus. So it would be more convenient to have a local body maker, bus body maker in the market. And we are looking for partners like that. We have already partners in Nigeria and in Kenya, and we are developing partners in South Africa and other countries. So, and in that process,
They're very tricky to wear.
hello.
We feel like pop stars.
In that process, there is a lot of people, local people in each market that will get involved. There will be mechanics, there will be service people, there will be workers who will participate in the value addition, the local value addition. And we're only too happy to make that happen, because it makes our presence more permanent. And I also think it serves the host country better, because it opens up other avenues for value addition in the economies.
Thank you very much, Anders. And if we have any bodybuilding partners, so to speak, in the audience, you know who to approach after this discussion is over. John, let me come to you. Let's talk money. Infrastructure, logistical projects are not cheap at all. Traditional financing products in place. What is the best way to fund these huge projects?
I shall answer that question indirectly, and I shall be impolite. If you look at the projects that have worked in Africa for infrastructure, for logistics, they have, by and large, the commonality of having either an off-taker, like an oil pipeline, or a mine. So, for example, we've been able to arrange $500 million of financing for a railway in Sierra Leone, purely and simply because there is an off-taker and a miner. Mm-hmm. I think I began by saying that the shortage of money is not the issue. It is how to make that money work effectively. Mm-hmm. The minister has mentioned Mombasa Port, has mentioned the railway. The common element in that is the government. The reality is that we have made it very, very difficult to get any infrastructural, logistical projects up and running in a viable and bankable manner because we've made government a key player in this. Now, this is not a pitch for privatization. It is actually almost an anti-World Bank kind of pitch, because what you then have had, if you take Kenya as a good example, and Kenya is very important as a gateway to a market of 300 million people, is that procurement rules and other rules designed to tackle a different problem, governance and bad behavior of officials, have become the major impediments to doing anything about logistics. So those of you who know East Africa know that the entire market is served by a road that runs from Mombasa all the way to Rwanda. Now, if you look at sections in Kenya, just through Nairobi, 5 years it took for the World Bank to kill a project using those procurement rules. So I said I would answer you indirectly. If we can get PPPs working, if we can get operators, for example, the Dubai port company in there, if we can get railway companies working on freight, then we will do well. But if we base the entire logistical development of Africa on the current basis of government advised, abetted, and held back, so to speak, by the traditional financing agencies, we aren't going anywhere.
Well, let me pick up on that. In terms of DP World, they've been involved in investing and also very much involved on an operational level, not least with Djibouti, for well over a decade now. Investing in the expansion and development handover of 3 new ports there. Is it just Djibouti that's going to benefit from the funds coming in directly flowing from the UAE and Dubai? Where else is standing to benefit?
Well, I think that question already speaks to a problem of perception. We talk about Africa. We actually should be talking about different parts of Africa.
Right.
The Djibouti serves one area, but the reality is that the bigger part of the market that we want to work with for export and imports is best served out of Mombasa, out of Beira, out of Lamu, out of Durban, out on the West Coast. There are a multiplicity of hubs that serve the continent.
Why is the money not flowing there? Again, is it perception or lack of a good BR pitch, if you like, on that side? Are there concerns about security or economic, political stability? What is redirecting that flow elsewhere?
My own perception of this is that ports are still seen as strategic assets by governments. And therefore, for governments even to surrender a concession of a particular service, and we've seen this in Kilindini, Mombasa, so many times, is near impossible.
Thank you very much. Suresh, let me come to you with a hot potato of a question, and picking up on what John was saying, how can Dubai best stand to benefit from the logistic and infrastructure boom that's taking place in Africa?
As I mentioned in my earlier speaking onto this is, number one, what my colleague said is that old traditional transparency system will not work in infrastructure projects. Because normally, I'm speaking from the practical situation, it takes 7 years to take a decision to say go. By the time they say go, the project cost goes to double. So you start all the financing process again. And then again, and then again, then again. So that is one part. Now, why UAE can do it? Because they have deep pocket and they can come up. Africa has the resource, you have the wealth. Both have to marry together and built, because these are big cost project which has to be done together, and you can use all the resources because you are the nearest station which is available here for all the mines, industrialization, everything, all the raw material you can utilize. which can pay off you.
Okay, thank you very much. Rigobert, let me come to you. In terms of the most important lessons or the key takeaway message that Dubai Ports, Dubai World could give to Gabon when it comes to you developing your infrastructure and your ports, what would that be? What's the key takeaway?
Okay. I want to first of all say that ports is and port and logistics is very important question. It is a critical question for bridging Africa to the world. And if we want to do this, we hope that we can ask DP World to help us by building a PPP and help us to have a good services in the ports, improve our securities, improve our quality of services, because we need indeed the global world to promote a movement of goods and people inside Africa and between Africa and other continents. And it's important, again, to have a best infrastructure, because Africa need an infrastructure to sustain her growth economically. And we have many, we need financial, but it's for us important to ask for the big operator as DP World on other to help us to do this.
So PPPs, again, keeps coming up as a recurrent theme, very important for the logistics sector. Do we have any questions from the floor? If you could raise your hand and we'll bring a microphone to you. If not, then prepare some and I will come back to you in a moment. I want to come to you, Anders. There was a word that we were bandying about when we had our briefing this morning. That was intermodality, a 360 approach. Do you think that that's very much the strategy that the governments of the separate African companies need to adopt going forward in the logistics space?
Or I think all modes of logistics will be important, and you can't sort of develop one side and not develop the other, because they will be dependent on each other. I would also like to stress another trend in Africa which requires attention, and that is the urbanization of the African population. More and more people are moving into big cities, and the big cities are having a problem of infrastructure. It's very expensive to develop the infrastructure for physical movements of passengers. In that context, buses are the only fast solution. And I think there are ways and means to do this. The most convenient thought that is moving around is to have end-to-end solutions. You seek a transport solution in a city which includes the services of building up the competency of the staff that is handling the system, which means service people, drivers, all of that, and you give that on a contract basis over to the supplier of the units. Another thing that I would say in this context, when it comes to movement of goods, there is one thing that should not be done, and which is practiced every day, and that is, I see in Africa lots of used trucks from Europe. I can only say that there is no need to buy used trucks in Europe. They are not suitable for Africa. The new trucks from India, for instance, or from Ras Al Khaimah are much more suitable, and they don't cost more than used trucks for Europe. So that's a recommendation which has more of sustainability in it than you would think.
Thank you very much.
Sorry about the sort of
Well,
cheap.
of course he would say that. Yes, the gentleman in the stripy tie. Bear with us, we'll bring a microphone to you. If you could let us know who you are as well, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Aston Kajara from Uganda. I'm aware that we have a lot of constraints, especially the landlocked countries. And we all know we all cannot be at the costs because it is limited. My proposal, therefore, is for investors. It's very important for us to choose where we locate. I think being landlocked can be used as a big opportunity for being land-linked. So investors could locate in areas such as Uganda, where you are properly linked to Sudan, DRC, to Rwanda, in the center of such regions. It is also wise that you take that opportunity instead of extending a railway all the way from Mombasa to Kampala. If you locate, say, in Kampala, which is nearby to the other states. So my advice is interstate trade, where you have a location, say such as Zambia, which is not on any cost, but you can trade with Zimbabwe, you can trade with South Africa, you can easily move without having to evolve expensive infrastructure projects. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is a brilliant point, isn't it? Because landlocked should be land-linked. As you were saying, Minister, earlier, maybe we just need to forge and foster better relations with neighbouring and bordering countries so that there can be some collective logistic action. How do we get that ball rolling, so to speak?
I just wanted to echo what my colleague has said. You see, I'll give you a typical example. There was a Chinese investor who wanted to set up a tire manufacturing factory. He wanted to set it in Mombasa because it was easier for him to move the raw materials and whatever equipment to Mombasa. But I said, the market is inside. Why are you setting it up here? If you set it here, you still have the problem of moving it inside. So why don't you set it in Uganda? So as we speak, within 3-4 months, he has already started his construction. He's setting up the factory in Uganda. So sometimes when you are inland, it has advantages. It's not always true that you'll have disadvantages, no. Because he is able now to reach Sudan, DRC, Rwanda, Burundi, and also Kenya itself. So being landlocked really does not necessarily mean that it disadvantages you. Now, how to do it is, you see, what we have done in East Africa, for example, and also COMESA is, we have brought down the barriers that we have been talking about here. EAC is in the process of setting up one border posts. In other words, if you clear from this particular border, then you don't have to clear on the other side again. So we're trying to do everything possible to try to bring down these barriers that we have been talking about since morning, so that we can be able to speed up the movement of goods and the labor. And the other thing also too is that we're introducing one visa for the whole of EAC. In other words, if you are coming to, for example, if you wanted to come to round the countries, Kenya, Rwanda, Burundi, Uganda, you just get one visa. We don't have to apply for 3 visas. So we are slowly moving towards the easing those barriers that actually hinder trade, and those that investors and traders are sort of complaining about. So you should be assured that we are doing everything possible. These comments that you're saying, we have heard them, and we are trying in the best way possible try to harmonize all the trade protocols, taxes, clearance, and all those things. So those are all one of the ways by which you can be able to ensure there's free movement of goods and the labor and the services as well.
A work in progress, absolutely. Yes. We have any more comments or questions from the floor? Please, gentlemen at the front.
Hello. Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Arun Kumar. I represent Frontline Development Partners from Dubai. Yeah, my question is from Mr. John. can you please share some of the logistic or transportation related project finance case study, which is like one of its unique kind, especially for Africa?
I'm not quite sure I caught that. Can I share projects which have been done?
Yes, on project finance, which is like not a traditional, but it's like an innovative way of funding, which you have done for transportation project.
Yes, I can. Unfortunately, they are few and far between. I mentioned Sierra Leone, the railway line that was built from the iron ore mine deep in the interior. And as I said, that became bankable because of the quality of both the miner and the off-taker. You've got a similar situation developing in Mozambique, where again it's a coal mine and it's again extraction of coal mine of coal to a reputable off-taker. You've got to a smaller extent a railway line which was built from a mine, a soda ash mine, to Mombasa, again because of the quality of the miner. In this case, it's Tata, and it's actually good to see that you've got other. Then you've got other projects which have not been done on project finance basis, have been done as public goods, but have been able to come out reasonably well. The Entebbe Airport is a good example, which was done a few years ago. Purpose was to cater for the Commonwealth Heads of State Conference, but it's turned out to be an effective airport for other things happening around the Great Lakes. But if you're saying in Middle Africa, the Lekki toll road is probably the most successful large project financed in Middle Africa, between the Sahara and the Limpopo. It's not exactly, it may not be exactly the most commercially successful, but it was able to attract financing. So you do have those kinds of projects, but they are few and far between. And I repeat, it is not for lack of money. There is a lot of project finance money prepared to come in from DFIs, from non-traditional sources of financing in the Middle East, in Asia, which is looking for projects. If I take, for example, the largest project envisaged now in Africa has got to be the Lamu Port Corridor, which is a $25 billion project, which has a combination of projects within that corridor. Now, it is possible it will be successful because the Kenya government has decided that it needs to have as many of the elements in there, the port berths, the oil pipeline, the rails, whatever, done commercially on a PPP basis, and has passed a law. The Kenyan Parliament has passed a law allowing that. If that happens, then you'll begin to see the prototype of projects which are not necessarily linked to an individual project, but which serve a greater good.
Thank you. Very valid point. I'll come to you in just 1 second, lady and gentleman. Quick follow-up question, quick comment from you, Suresh, talking about financing and keeping projects on time and on budget. Ethiopia, do you have a project there you'd like to share with us?
Number one, a minister mentioned about costing of the project. The costing of the project, what I did in one of the cases, is the 25 to 30% should be local portion in this type of position. And that brings the capacity building also locally. So that brings the cost down by 10 to 15%. Then those local job which has to be done has to be funded by the budget, because these are long-term project, 5 years. So the load does not come that much on the budget. So the cost of the fund reduces. You have to only borrow 65%. As Minister has said rightly, there are a lot of soft fund available internationally, should be used only 40 to 50%. so the interest cost comes down. Balance 20 to 25% should be done with the commercial banking. And what you should do the project, like today, we do PPP project, which is just start from the port to that mine. The government should have an intention that not to give project like this way. If it is there up to mine, they should add at least 300, 400 kilometer more to put somewhere else where the agriculture is available and all this thing. So this way, it is a combination of each project has to be done and the cost comes down.
Thank you very much. Ladies first, if you don't mind, sir. The lady at the front, please.
My name is Gizeshwar from Ethiopia. I would like to ask one of the, the country is, our country is landlocked, and my question is there any country is in Africa landlocked and is implementing multimodal? And from multimodal, who's a good advisor from, or which consultancy company is a good advisor for the multimodal, and is it managed by only government or a private sector? Thank you.
Thank you very much. In terms of, again, we're talking cooperation between neighboring countries, border controls, ease of access, ease of trade. Who's going to take the lead here and facilitate this? Does there need to be a leader?
I've just recently come from Ethiopia to talk about exactly that. And Ethiopia is a fascinating case because the trade links and the transport links have run traditionally northwards, and Ethiopia has looked to diversify that and run that southwards. And to be fair to the government of Ethiopia, it's done a tremendous amount of job in creating a road, a railway, a power links, and other links down south. So you've got a situation where the government of Ethiopia seems to be very clear as to what it wants and wants done. And contrary to a lot of theory today, is being done by a pretty strong authoritarian government, which is saying this is the way it will go. But then when you reach the, shall we say, the Kenya end, it becomes a much more complicated process of procurement and this and that and the other. So I'm hoping Ethiopia will become a successful example, but it's got challenges in that direction.
Maybe there's a need for some intergovernmental association, correct, some trade body with maybe no leader.
Which I think that's why the COMESA becomes very important in being a supranational entity able to get over these national hurdles.
Exactly, well put. One quick question to finish on. The gentleman here, please. We'll bring a microphone to you.
My name is Virender, and I'm with BDP International. My question is, of late I've been hearing, we've been talking about financing and funding, and I do understand that World Bank is ready to give loan. Now, I may be totally wrong, but World Bank is ready to give loan for the infrastructure. Whereas I find that most of the funding which is coming into Africa is coming from some specific countries who are funding it and for extending it to the mining, only to the mines where they have interest or only to the areas where they have interest. So, in fact, you're not getting a full benefit, as Suresh was also mentioning, like, you could probably extend the railway line going beyond to the agriculture sector so that there's a multi-purpose use of this thing. So one question is that why are we not focusing with the World Bank and trying to get more loans? And two, just going back to Suresh's question.
Thank you. World Bank loans are preferable to private investment or even governmental investment because the vested interest, if I understand you, is different. The long-term interest could be slightly different. Who would like to answer that question? Yes, please.
When I went to Africa in 2003, the biggest problem which I've seen is structuring of the proposal. whether World Bank, whether IMF, or any other country. The lady spoke about Ethiopia. We built up 5,000 kilometers of railway. And when I started Built Means, I did the engineering for that. 2006, when we spoke that 5,000 kilometers of railway, everybody was shouting how we will get $20 billion. Coming back to DB Port, when it started, people said how it will pay off. Today, the wait listed is almost 4 months on the port. You have no place available. You have to make another 2 ports, Tazura and all this thing. So it's only the question of proposal, how you structure it. And I think World Bank, IMF, and all other people are very open to fund this situation. Few projects we are going to do like that way. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My final question, in terms of maritime security at the ports in particular, if we look at a country like Gabon, is maritime security a priority for the government and companies to address, to encourage more foreign direct investment and PPPs? Is that very important?
Thank you. Yes, it's very important to maritime security because we have the international code ESPS, which requests us to hike our level of security. And according to this, we work with the international company to hike these levels, and we want also work with the big society as Dubai works to increase our security.
Thank you very much. Again, lessons to be learned by Dubai entities, of which we're very proud. I'm afraid we have to leave it there. Minister, very quick comment from you.
Yes, a very quick comment. This is regarding the maritime security. I think we in the East African region suffered quite a lot because of the piracy in the Indian Ocean. I think that's one of the reasons why the governments of Ethiopia, Uganda, Kenya, they moved in Somalia to try to suppress that insurgency which has been there, and it has been very successful. So I think now the cost of insurance and so on has come down because of that increased presence of the AU forces in Somalia. So yes, maritime security is very important. We take it very seriously because most of the traffic, either from Ethiopia, not from Ethiopia, but from Egypt or from Dubai, they all pass through there.
Exactly.
So it's important that we have that area which is very secure.
Thank you very much. Very good to hear. Well, there we must leave our panel discussion. We very much hope that you'll be able to network and mingle with my esteemed guests at the gala dinner this evening at 8 p.m. But for now, it just remains for me to ask you to thank them for their participation. Good.